I wanted to turn right now to our guest in studio here in New York. Not that he doesn't come from where you are right now. His name is Mohamed Abdel Dayem, and he is the head of the Middle East and North Africa section of the Committee to Protect Journalists. Sharif, you were standing in front of state media when you got word that Mubarak had been forced out. More than 100 journalists, we don't even know the numbers at this point, of the journalists who have been hurt just in the last few weeks, harassed, assaulted, detained. We're going to go, by the way, live to President Obama when he makes his address in a few minutes. But Mohamed, first of all, congratulations. Though you're not in the streets of Tahrir, you are born in Egypt.
Correct. Thank you very much. We've obviously all been watching the events unfolding today. I've been talking to journalists. Anecdotally, people are saying they can finally report openly. People are not scared to take their cameras out anymore. I was talking to one journalist standing outside the state TV building, and somebody in uniform from the military, he wasn't sure what the rank was, came up to him and said, "You look like a journalist, and we confiscated this camera from another journalist a couple of days ago, and I don't know who he is, but here, film, go crazy." I mean, it's truly a momentous moment for Egypt and for Egyptian journalists, and also for the foreign journalists who have been covering this story and have done it at great personal risk, as we've seen in the past few days, where the government was going after journalists physically and in other ways, beating journalists, detaining journalists, confiscating equipment, breaking cameras, destroying entire bureaus. So we're very happy to see this, and obviously the situation remains very fluid, and it's not entirely clear what will be happening next, but we look forward to a significant improvement in the press environment in Egypt, and we call on the government to release the one blogger that we know of that remains in custody, Karim Amr.
He's out.
He's out. Okay, well, that's news.
Yes.
He was just released, apparently.
Yes.
So I'm happy to hear that.
Yes, we just got news that he was released, a very important young blogger who already had been imprisoned for 4 years.
Absolutely. He was in prison for 4 years for daring to criticize Mubarak, for daring to criticize the institutions of the state, for daring to criticize the rampant censorship that existed. And he spent 4 long years of his life in prison, constantly being harassed by other prisoners who were essentially paid to do so, by prison wardens. They used to take away his reading materials. They used to confiscate letters of support that he would receive from all over the world. So he has indeed paid a very, very high price. But I'm sure if we had Karim on the line with us right now, he would say that it was well worth it.
Mm-hmm. So he was let out after 4 years. Then on Sunday, suddenly, while he was in Tahrir Square with everyone else, he and a colleague, as they were leaving, they disappeared. No one knew where they were. It ended up he was in a desert jail outside of Cairo, and we just got word that he has been released and that he is safe, which means that he got to celebrate with all Egyptians and with people who care about democracy around the world. But I have to ask, Mohamed, where were you when you got word? Where were you sitting or standing?
I was at my desk at work on the furiously dialing numbers of journalists, trying to get a reading on what was going on. And when it happened, I hung up the phone and I looked at the screen and I tried to beat back the tears. It was a beautiful moment.
So Sharif was at State TV when this all went down. Talk about State TV, about the number of reporters and employees of State TV who've been streaming out of state television and joining the ranks of the protesters in Tahrir, saying they couldn't lie anymore.
Yeah, well, they'd had enough. And this happened at State TV. This happened at the Journalist Syndicate a few days earlier. The journalists almost physically drove out the long-despised chief of the syndicate, who is a longtime Mubarak apologist, who did very, very little when journalists were being dragged out of his own syndicate by the secret police, did very little about it, went on State TV and brazenly implied, indirectly, that he was spending a personal political capital with the now deposed Minister of the Interior to free these colleagues, as if he was doing them a favor. Clearly, he'd been in that position for too long and had forgotten what the point of being the chief of the syndicate is, which is to protect the journalists that are members of the syndicate. He's done a very poor job in doing that, and a few days ago, journalists finally made it very clear how they feel about him and essentially escorted him out of the syndicate.
This just came from the New York Times live blog. Al Arabiya, the Saudi-owned satellite channel, reports the higher military council will sack the cabinet, suspend both houses of parliament, and rule with the head of the Supreme Constitutional Court. Where does media stand now? What does this all mean for journalists and, of course, for the people of Egypt?
Well, this latest development that you just announced is a very promising one. The head of the Constitutional Court is one person that has definitely not been tainted by the Mubarak regime and the things that it has done over the past 30 years, and particularly over the past 18 months. And this is a good omen for all Egyptians, but particularly for the press. He is a man that had long complained and had long used his official post to talk about and to illustrate forged elections and other irregularities in the 2005 election and also in the most recent one in late 2010. So this is a promising development, and I hope it has positive reflections on journalists. I would like to briefly mention that whoever takes over next has to make it clear immediately to journalists that they will be allowed to report openly, that media will, this is a new day for Egypt and a new dawn for Egypt, and that media will start doing what it is supposed to do, to report the news and let the people make their own decisions. And we urge whichever authorities solidify and take their place in the coming days to also tell journalists and the people of Egypt what happened to Rida Hilal, a senior editor at Al-Ahram that was snatched off of the streets in August of 2003. We still don't know what happened to him. It's been 8 years now. CPJ and others have advocated vigorously on Rida Hilal's behalf, and many suspect that he's in state custody or worse, and we simply don't know. And the time has come for whoever is in charge to let the people know what has happened to Rida Hilal.
A spokesman for Egypt's military has just appeared on television to read a new statement. Reading in flat monotone, the statement said the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces is currently studying the situation and will issue further statements to clarify its position. The military also had a farewell message for Mubarak. They said the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces is saluting President Hosni Mubarak for all he has given in sacrifice in times of war and peace. Mohamed Abdel Dayem, before you go, I wanted to ask, because the significance of this goes beyond Tahrir Square, beyond Cairo and Alexandria and Suez and Makhala. It goes to the Middle East. It goes to the entire world. But I wanted to, from your prism of looking at journalists, what this means for journalists in the Middle East.
Well, in the past 2 weeks or so, and again this morning, governments throughout the Middle East are trying to repress free reporting, are trying to repress impartial reporting. Just today, a journalist in Amman, Jordan, who was covering a demonstration calling for more political and civil rights, had his camera confiscated and smashed. Earlier last week, similar things happened in Yemen and in Sudan, again with journalists who were covering protests and social unrest. And it would really behoove these governments now to take a short time out and to reflect on what's happened in Tunisia and to reflect on what happened in Egypt and to realize that the status quo that has been in place for decades upon decades of simply cracking down against the media, controlling the flow of information, is no longer the order of the day. It hasn't worked in Tunis, it hasn't worked in Cairo, and it's not going to work elsewhere. And there are lessons to be learned, both for the demonstrators throughout the region, but also for the governments. It would really be a good time to think about these things. As
we talk to you, I want you to take a look at what is on television, because it's very significant now. Let's show the video of Nile TV. Nile TV, which when the uprising happened, made no mention of what was taking place. It's a little fuzzy, but we're going to show it right now. A very different picture than we saw a few weeks ago. They would not go to the protests in the streets. Your response,
yes,
Mohamed?
Well, they're finally transmitting news. It's about time. It's the Nile TV news channel, and for the past 18 days they weren't transmitting news. They weren't even really transmitting propaganda. They were frankly transmitting outright lies. And when people started criticizing the coverage by state-owned media, after days and days and days of furious criticism, the best they could do was do a very long shot of the protest from far, far, far away, so far away that you couldn't see the signs or the flags or anything, and then they titled that shot as pro-Mubarak demonstration. So even when they showed the right footage, they editorialized in such a way as to mislead the people. And the people simply have too many sources of information.
Shahira Amin is one who left. You know her.
Yes, absolutely. And the people simply have too many sources of information. That doesn't work anymore. It might have worked in the 1960s and 1970s when all the Egyptian people had was 3 state-owned newspapers and 1 channel on TV. Now they have hundreds of newspapers and literally thousands of channels on their satellite receivers. So it simply doesn't work. It simply doesn't work anymore. And that's precisely what I was talking about with regard to other governments in the region.
Before we go to the other governments, let's just play a clip. Let's remember a few days ago when Shahira Amin, the well-known host of state television, of Nile TV, walked out of the studios and into Tahrir Square.
I'm here in Tahrir Square, and I'm determined to be on the side of the people, not regime. And that's why I'm here.
Right, and so you've resigned from Nile Television?
I walked out yesterday. I can't be part of the propaganda machine. I'm not going to feed the public eyes.
That was Shahira Amin quitting Nile TV and joining the protesters in Tahrir. Again, Egypt State TV is the largest in the world. It comprises 8 networks.
That's correct.
So, more specifically, very quickly, Tunisia right now, which continues to unfold. The reporters, how much freedom they experience. And then what about Saudi Arabia?
Well, the reporters in Tunisia, I've been in touch with people in Tunisia on the ground since last month, and people are able to report freely for the first time ever. There's obviously security concerns, and at one point there was still a curfew, and moving around was very difficult. But people are reporting openly, and they're not scared, and they're not worried about the secret police tearing down their door in the middle of the night, and they're no longer worried about being slapped around by a military official or a police official in front of their young children, which was standard practice in Tunisia for many, many, many years. And they're ecstatic to be able to report openly. And I think something very similar awaits Egyptian journalists. And they're also euphoric right now for all the obvious reasons, because primarily, first and foremost, they're Egyptian, but also because these people have been working for decades under the yoke of a censorship regime that has finally crumbled. And they can't wait to write openly. They can't wait to appear on camera and really say what's going on the street.
But isn't it why governments are now trembling? Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, Yemen.
Yes, it seems that they are. And, it would be wise of them to try something different from what Ben Ali and Mubarak tried, because they're batting at 0%. The repression, the attitude of repressing the media and repressing the people as well, I might add, is one that has proven its failure two times out of 2 times. So they're batting at 0%.
The role of journalists this minute in Egypt, Mohamed, is so important, because this is the moment that, well, it's determined which way this country goes. Does it lead into a military coup? Does it have watchdogs that ensure a democratic process?
The 2 most important professions in Egypt as we speak are the military and journalism. They are the ones that are going to determine Egypt's future. They are the ones that are going to determine in which direction Egypt goes. And journalists have a very, very important task to play now. And from everyone I've talked to, hundreds and hundreds of journalists over the past 18 days on the phone, and early in the morning, in the middle of the night, at every hour of the day and night, have been fully aware of what awaits them when this regime falls. And it has fallen. And they're anxious to play that role. They're anxious to play that role professionally, and they're anxious to play that role as Egyptians who have waited far too long for this moment to arrive. And it has finally arrived, and they are willing and able and ready to fulfill that role.
Mohamed Abdel Dayem, thanks so much for being with us of the Committee to Protect Journalists, and we'll link to your website at democracynow.org.